are conservative. You don't blend them. It is not a case of incompetence. It's just that they are conservative. I come to think of it in the recent times, and that the judges are tilted toward those provided for them. Which is why, for activists, the real challenge should be how do we get the judiciary to be independent? That is starting point. That has to have been on mission and where we want it. So I hope you do know that the most justices will have at the High Court, they tend to lean in favor of what they established in one them. So I think this is one of those cases. We're on appeal. I will hope you will join us in this journey. Let's see where we go. At the end of the day, issue of local standard is one that Ghana will meet is so much to establish. It's next. But if there is no other area where you can find here, in the area of showing that the Nigerian citizen has the local standard to challenge anything such as the one challenge. If you think any provision of the law is unconstitutional, nobody can stop you from doing that, and that is exactly what we're making. We'll definitely take it to the end. I hope our global rights and new life will be prepared to join us if we feel like we will see the question. But the challenge in public interest in the nation is so on. Most of them will find that the lower cost. We're paying that something. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Questions.
Okay, for him or
Your name and organization.
My name is Salas Olashi. My what people now what law was being made. And we are public guidance and co. What is society point out this law visions what the law asks.
Well, I believe that civil society can convey volunteer opinion if they are invited. As we know in Nigerian democracy of today, each time they say the bill has passed, I think the second reading, they will now say it should go for public hearings. The question is who is invited to public hearing. If I remember my law in this area very well, when we talk about access rights, access rights comes from access to information and now moves to participation. Before you talk about revenue, that is for public hearing, so that people who are knowledgeable can contribute. People that are knowledgeable are not invited, it becomes a challenge. Because it's only people who have got information that can actually participate. If you don't have the information, participate. So the public hearing we talk about now, who participates in public hearing? It's not only civil society. Of course, lawyers and others who are knowledgeable in that area invited. Public hearing. If you ask me, public hearing for the police of National Assembly and the state making should be invited experts. I'm not sure they invite them. If they are invited, of course, as civil society in the making of that, people who have at least listed I'm not saying that making your opinion known will have been issue. I don't think that's like it's here now. These issues were even raised before that extension was passed. Who raised this issue? Didn't bring them to consultation. Yes.
Okay, so my, just on the upside, you talked about the levels of shares and I was wondering, aside the alleged corruption, are you guys looking at this? That's one. Then to the question of this issue here, now one of the outcomes I had read was that one of the outcomes at trial was that you guys were not able to demonstrate clear impact from the Cama law. Now you say you are willing or you are ready to go even to the supreme level. What has changed? Is there now impact? Are you now being directed? What do you think will be done differently to challenge this?
Okay.
Thank you. We want to hear it from my mouth about question of independence of the judiciary. You will not hear from my mouth. But just to say that in the first place, it is probably not right to say you. I'm not part of the judiciary to the extent of this discussion, but I practice law anyway. Okay, so what we are saying by independence is by looking at the issue of appointments of judges. Can you really say that in Nigeria, most appointments, not all, some are on merit, no argument about it. But what you find in Nigeria now is that virtually every politician of note wants his or her own to be a judge. This one, you can do your empirical study to find out. Even in the last 1 week, my good friend Chidodin Kalu has to catalog the recent appointments they are proposing. Names of wives of some governors are appearing there as we talk. As we speak here, they attempt to appoint Justice to the Court of Appeal. Names of wives of governors. So you can think by the last 1-2 years is I'm not sure this one is an issue for debate. Secondly, funding. I hope we know by the Constitution we say we practice that the 3 arms of government are supposed to be independent in terms of funding, in terms of management. So can you really say that in Nigeria, the judiciary particularly is free from the executive branch and the legislature? Madam, can you really say that? If they are complete, if they are independent, if the 3 arms of government are independent by the Constitution, it means that as you are making the budget, as the executive is bringing their own, the judiciary will bring their own, the legislature will bring. You look at the budgets, National Assembly will look at them and pass the budget and allocate to each of these arms their funds to manage the way they want. We will not have issues like the executive building houses for. Okay, maybe I shouldn't go through that. So in virtually every state, let's be federal, they're even trying. In virtually every state, the governors make noise when they buy cars for the churches. Is it supposed to be? Is that independent? That alone should tell you. So they decide when they will buy cars. But the National Assembly member, as soon as they take food, they buy brand new stuff. In fact, they distribute. And it looks like every year they share. But in the case of this sharing, they will buy cars for them and even call new press people to come and witness where they are handing over cars. They build houses for them and call you to come and who are they to build houses for another arm of government? These things are, yeah, you don't need anybody to tell you. So like they say, he who pays the piper often comes first. So if they buy cars for you and build houses for you. Okay, so your next question is what? Yes, the court said we did not establish how those provisions have affected us. It's not just affecting us, it's all of us talking about. All of us that run civil society organizations, all of us that belong to churches and what have you. Everybody is involved. So the question they will be asking is why we or the NGOs that went to court. But it is a matter of constitution now. If there's any attempt to flout the provisions of the constitution, it becomes everybody's interest. Every citizen is entitled to challenge any law that is contrary to the constitution. In fact, by virtue of that constitutional provision, such law is not and void and of no effect. Yeah, to the extent of inconsistency. So it doesn't require anybody telling anybody, everybody, every citizen. So unless we don't have any rights again, unless those rights conferred on the Constitution are no longer fundamental. If they are fundamental, we have a right to ask questions about governance. If you don't have a right to ask for your votes to count, at least you should be able to have the right to say, this one is against the Constitution. Some years back, I was reviewing an article sent by a Polish student for New Life publication. And there I saw that in Poland, people should have right to go to court and challenge voting rights. You can challenge it. I hope you know that is the minutest of rights you should have in a democracy, to insist that your vote should count. So when they're elected, you should also have a right to say, no, this law you passed is contravenes social provisions of the Constitution. And to that extent, null and void and of no effect. And that is exactly what this case is all about. So it's not about the civil society organizations or others that went to court. It's about everybody who will be affected by that law. So you don't expect people to wait until it affects them individually before you can say, this is unconstitutional. Thank you.
My name is Gabriel from Vanguard. We just want to be very clear about the issue here. What are your demands? Do you are in court? What are your demands? And in this issue,
Well, in a nutshell, our demands are simply for amendment of the Companies and Allied Matters Act. Yes, those particular provisions affect the rights of civil society organizations. There are so many. Honorable Lagi, maybe you can comment.
Thank you very much, Prof. I apologize that I came late. Unfortunately, if I tell the story of why I'm late and how I'm late, it's going to be probably more ridiculous than the general story. So I'll just skip that. When we're done, I'll probably So I don't know what happened. I got into town, and then 30 minutes ago, I was in town. I don't know why I found myself on the new road to Kanshi. And I've been in Abuja since 1988. And that wouldn't be because Wike is doing the roads. I just don't know what happened. And I apologize. So you can imagine what I'm talking about. And I've been here since 1988. All right. Now, the Constitution of Nigeria guarantees us certain basic as citizens of this country. I'll be a little bit Now, don't worry. Let me state first that Nigeria met us here. All Nigerians, the country met us in this geographical location called Nigeria. So Nigeria happened to us. We didn't happen to it. So we have a constitution that says, for example, I want to be very explicit, that the constitution is supreme and its provisions shall have binding force. That's section 1 of the constitution. Shall have binding force on all authorities and persons throughout the federation. Subsection 2 says the Federal Republic of Nigeria shall not be governed, nor shall any person or group of persons take control of the government of Nigeria or any part thereof, except in accordance with the provisions of this constitution. Now, this case is about whether or not the National Assembly can constitute itself to make laws that are not supported by the constitution. The entire matter. The provisions that we are challenging are sections 824, 828 sub 4, 850 sub 1D, sub 2E of the Companies and Allied Matters Act. Our argument in respect of this section is the National Assembly under the 1999 Constitution does not have the power to create, for example, powers to CAC to constitute itself as a court, to determine or to exclude the right of citizens to fair hearing before they can make a determination. So if, for example, the National Assembly make a law provision, one of these ones that I've mentioned, that says when a company, that says when an incorporated trustee can be punished for an act to be determined by CAC itself without fair hearing in respect of his rights and obligations, we do not think that the Constitution guarantees that. The Constitution says nobody shall be held responsible, either civil or criminal, for any offense or infringement without first giving a fair hearing before a court, and an unbiased court, neutral court, and in public. So where the right of NGOs, for example, will be determined without an opportunity for the NGOs to be heard, will have been taking away the right of the NGOs to fair hearing under the Constitution. So the amendment to Cama, in some of the instances, completely removed those rights and accorded such powers that the National Assembly does not have power to accord to CAC in the way they will treat NGOs, whether there is an infringement or lack of accounting or so on and so forth. Now, so basically, these are some of the kind of provisions in Cama that was being challenged. Now, and the challenge is based on the guaranteed rights of citizens of this country by this country's constitution. Same rights that accords the powers of the National Assembly to be a National Assembly, for the government itself to be a government, and for the courts themselves to be courts. One of the interesting arguments we kept having, and this is a little bit going to be technical, is in respect of section 16 of the Constitution. There have been lots of argument as to whether chapter 2 of the Constitution is just sheer, whether or not you can take anybody to court under that section and be able to get a judgment. But section 16, chapter 2 of the Constitution had placed duties and responsibilities on citizens and the government. So there is a responsibility on the National Assembly under chapter 2 of the Constitution on how they behave in making laws. Part of the question is, what happens to a National Assembly that makes laws in this regard to the provisions of some of the duties that are imposed on them by chapter 2 of the Constitution? So If, for example, the National Assembly has the power to make laws for the creation of an agency that is supposed to regulate the conduct of business in Nigeria, and then it extends that power to want to interfere with the exercise of civil liberty to organize for the purposes of the protection of rights of members of a particular association within the Constitution that is also characterized by the Constitution. What happens if the National Assembly ignores the duty placed on it by Chapter 2 of the Constitution, 16 of the Constitution? It says the state, which is the government of Nigeria, shall, within the context of the ideals and objectives for which provisions are made in this Constitution, harness the resources of the nation and self-reliant economy, control the national economy in such a manner as to secure the maximum welfare, freedom, and happiness of every citizen on the basis of social justice and equality of status and opportunity. It went further to say, without prejudice to its right to operate or participate in areas of the economy other than the major sector of the economy, manage and operate the major sectors of the economy. Now, without prejudice to the right of any person to participate in the area of the economy within the major sector of the economy, protect the right of every citizen to engage in the economic activities outside the major sectors. The state shall direct its policy towards ensuring the promotion of a planned and balanced economy, that material resources, blah, 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 that the economic suitable. I just want to go straight to the provision. Now, subsection 3 of section 16 of the Constitution provides that a body shall be set up by an act of the National Assembly which shall have the power. This is CAC, for example, the Corporate Affairs Commission. The creation of CAC, the power for the state to create CAC is provided under section 16, sub 3, that provides that a body shall be set up by an act of the National Assembly which shall have power. A, to review from time to time the ownership, control of business enterprises operating in Nigeria and make recommendation to the President on same. 2, to administer any law for the regulation of the ownership and control of such enterprises. Now, subsection 4 says, for the purposes of subsection 1 of this section, the reference to the major sector of the economy shall be construed as reference to such economic activities as may from time to time be declared by the resolution of each House of the National Assembly. Now, if we look at this section, we understand that this is the basis upon which CAC was created. Now, it started from the part of the Constitution that some lawyers argue is not justiciable, that we cannot challenge the exercise of these powers under the Constitution. But as we can see, there's just no way that these are duties that are created by the Constitution on the state. Sorry, I just want to go quickly to. So we have section 17 that says the social order is founded on the ideals of freedom, equality, and justice. In furtherance of social order, every citizen shall have equality of right, obligation, and opportunity before the law. Sorry, I'm trying to look at the duty. I'm just going to go straight to Mahmoud. Mahmoud, please come and help me. Now, part of the issue of local standard that we've been discussing, the Constitution makes provisions that every citizen of this country has a duty, and it referred to it as a duty, duty of citizen. It says every citizen has a duty to help the government. Verse is to uphold the flag, uphold the integrity of this country, and help the government in the enforcement of laws. Now, the argument we have before the court is, as NGOs, we will describe as persons. If there is an attempt to bring, does not only apply to citizens. Section 1 sub 1 is very clear that the provision of this constitution applies to all institutions and authorities. Our understanding is that it applies to the president of this country, it applies to the National Assembly, it applies to CAC. Now, if there is a provision of the law that says that CAC as an authority of government, or sorry, CAC is referred to, is an authority of government. So the Constitution says no part of the state of Nigeria can be taken over, can be taken over by any person except in accordance to the Constitution. So if CAC is regulated or run in such a way that is inconsistent with the provision of the Constitution, who should challenge it? And if it is doing in an extension of its activity as an executive arm of government to do the biddings of the executive arm of government, in ignoring its responsibility under the Constitution to check and balance that executive. It is not supposed to work in collaboration with them. It is supposed to check and balance it. That is the duty they have under the Constitution. The Constitution does not say the president is your brother or your friend or your party man, you collaborate with him. No. It says you check and balance. The judiciary exists to then check and balance these two arms of government. Because if we look at Section 6 of the Constitution, it says all the judicial powers, and I'll come to that, all the judicial powers of the state is vested in the court under the Constitution. The Federal High Court is one of such courts. So the if you, with those provisions, if there is a dispute between states and citizens, especially those at the appellate level, decline jurisdiction. Decline jurisdiction in the resolution of disputes. That then permits citizens to pick up knife and machete, have jurisdiction in resolving issues between citizens. And that is how dangerous the decision of the Federal High Court is in this matter. When our courts, knowing that all the judicial power over all matters, in fact, Section 6, subsection 6 of jurisdiction that may be contained in laws or under the Constitution, the courts have inherent powers to resolve all disputes. So it is outside for there to be a dispute, and then our courts, especially the appellate courts, to say we don't have jurisdiction. When they say that, state control over citizens. So if we don't have jurisdiction to resolve your personal justice, because we lost, so we are then allowed to carry machete or fairness. If the court says we can't adjudicate. In our own case, our laws have extended jurisdiction even beyond provisions of the Constitution, as long as the issues are ones of dispute. Section 6 of the Constitution have given our courts powers to resolve them. Even if there is no law that says you have jurisdiction over A, B, C, D. So the limit of such jurisdiction, we will argue, and we hope we do this in the appeal, is where there are no provisions. I mean, where there are jurisdictions that are within the Federal High Court in the resolution of certain disputes, it is for the Federal High Court to say, look, we don't have jurisdiction on this matter, but the High Court of a state has jurisdiction on that matter. If the High Court of a state says we don't have jurisdiction on this matter, it should say the the National Industrial Court has. If they don't have, they could then say jurisdiction over such dispute can rest with magistrate court or state courts. But to then say that courts do not have jurisdiction over disputes, and it does not matter the subject matter, means we are now saying that there is a chance under our constitution to go outside the law and then find justice or resolve certain disputes, when clearly the constitution makes provision and had stated that there is inherent jurisdiction that extends beyond all that are provided by law and even the constitution itself. So our own problem now is, and that is why this litigation is quite strategic, it is to continue to advocate and agitate that as long as it is a constitutional matter, as stated very eloquently by Leonard So, as long as it is an infringement of the supreme law, citizens have a duty. And that duty is not actually simply theoretical. The Constitution has placed that duty on citizens to help the government. So there is no limit to local standard as long as it is on a constitutional matter. The Constitution did not say that. There is no law that can say that. The courts will be wrong to then try to create a situation where they renege on their duties under Section 6 of the Constitution and then throw away citizens to doing justice the best way it suits them. I do not think that is the intent of the Constitution or the intent of the creation of the modern Nigeria. So that's what I have to say about that. If he comes with the provision of the duty of citizens, it will be important that I read it out. Yeah. No, any more questions? All right.
I want to know because from what you said, the point is that we are looking at this as taking on us, or we should not take blood in their hands and turn it into ascertain whether economists or some who are what should be done to them. What I'm saying now is that what does your organization try? Who should be responsible for handling the issues here first?
Yeah.
Or are you saying that court, that before CC takes such action, we should go to court and ask the people, maybe the companies or those involved, to come and argue their cases before it takes decisions? I don't know.
Yeah, that is what the Constitution says. It's an issue of fair hearing. So that when your rights are being determined by anybody, you are entitled to fair hearing. Now, what we have under Cama is that, assuming I infringe any of the Companies and Allied Matters Act, then the Director General of CAC can decide punishment for me without giving me a fair hearing. First of all, we don't know if he's a lawyer. We don't know whether he will be biased. He will definitely be, because he will be the Director General of that organization. He is not going to punish his organization. In fact, he may not even have a right or power to punish his organization under the circumstances. But when you make a person a judge in his own cause, that will be contrary to the Constitution. That is basically some of the provisions we are doing. Now, if the Constitution says it is supreme, and every law that is inconsistent with the Constitution is null and void and shall be set aside to that extent, what happens to a law the National Assembly makes that is contradicts the right of citizens or that contradicts the fundamental right of fair hearing. What do? It's trying to do is to say, look, take a look at it and compare it with what provision contradicts the provision for stand, even as a law in that book. The question is, it can't because it contradicts the Constitution and it should therefore be set aside. So basically, that is the approach we have to this case. Now, what is the course of action? It's a constitutional provision, inconsistency of this provision with this. The court is not even looking at the case. It is looking at who brought the case, whether we have a right. And the question is, as a citizen of Nigeria, do I have a duty to the Constitution? Do I have a duty to the state? Or do I need anything special to make sure that my country is governed in accordance with its own laws? That it doesn't affect me, does it really matter? It affects my brother, it doesn't affect me. Should that exclude me from responsibility? And if the court say they don't have jurisdiction, the question I'm asking now is, what do we do? We can't resolve these issues in court. Where do we go to? Because that is the danger in the decision of the Federal High Court in respect of this particular case. That if we allow this to go, we will then be able to say you can come to a point where there is no other way to resolve your dispute but by self-help. Is that what the Constitution contemplates? Is that what a modern state should do? So that is why we're challenging. Now, we are challenging, first of all, the actions of the Senate President, the Speaker House of Reps, Corporate Affairs Commission, and Attorney General of Nigeria. Unfortunately, this appeal will be challenging the jurisdiction and the judiciary itself in how it makes decisions. And I guess, because unless the judiciary does something about it, the infringement we're talking about will remain. The flimsy excuse that the person who ought to file the case had not filed. So I have to be killed first before my life, my right to life is established. Or does the right to life also mean the right not to be killed? So all the people being killed across the country, can we go to court and say we don't want more people killed? Or do we wait until all of them are killed before we can then have the local standard to say somebody has died and therefore? Is that what the provision for life, the right to life established? Because it is the person, we are supposed to live the life. When we are dead, we are no longer living. In fact, when we die, we no longer have local standard because that particular provision protects life and not death. And basically, this is as simple as this case is and how dangerously shy the judiciary is acting in respect of that. And the consequences will be that we will establish a situation where we get to the limit of the state in resolving dispute between parties, and then we can then create a right that persons within the society are then entitled to act outside the law. Because if we have to live within this constitution, there cannot be a limit to jurisdiction of the constitution. Because once we have a limit to law, we then create the opportunity for chaos. All right.
Yes, my question was that I know you are talking about legal issues. But I want to ask from the point of
not the Jonah type, because I'm a lawyer.
Okay. It's still in line with it.
It's okay.
You know, because this case now,
yes,
the international community is also watching.
Yes.
So, what are the implications before the international community, when they are coming up with this kind of laws that you're kind of not you are saying not even the civil CSOs,
yeah,
but even Nigerian general.
Yeah.
So what's your message in that direction? That kind of laws.
Yeah. That if we have a constitution, and in so many cases, this National Assembly has amended this constitution, We should just live in accordance with our laws. That's all we're asking, nothing more. This is not about expressing preference or arguing a prejudice. This case is simply about the Constitution says this, stick to what the Constitution says because it's applicable to everybody and every authority. If it says you cannot make laws to create a judiciary outside the judiciary created by the Constitution itself, and you can therefore not be a judge in your own cause, stick to it. Because this is about aberration. They are going outside the powers granted to them by the Constitution, and they are killing the Constitution in such a way that they are creating a dangerous scenario for the country. And that's why I argued it this way, because the courts will need to know that if you say you don't have jurisdiction over a constitutional issue, what should citizens do? What then is allowed? If our laws, even our supreme laws, cannot protect that, there is a limit to the application of the Constitution. What then should apply after that limit?
I was kind of, I'm caught in between. The stand talking about
Local standard.
Talking about this one.
Yes.
Something.
Local standard, yes. Local jurisdiction is about two things: party and cause of action. So when you go to court, you in it court. For example, the Jonah story, I think a story like that, is social, is private, is a comment. If the court has no jurisdiction, it will tell you I have no jurisdiction over that subject matter. Then you have territorial jurisdiction. Now, if we pass that, whether an issue that involves the Constitution, the citizens of this country that the Constitution applies to, if you are in breach of the Constitution, it affects them. If the Constitution does well, it affects them. What do they have a right to question when you do something to the Constitution that affects them? That is the local standard we're talking about, directly involved. The question we have is, who is not directly under the Nigerian Constitution? Who lives outside it? That for the issue of the Constitution arises, you now say, no, you haven't shown me sufficient interest in the supreme law of this country for me to hear you. Do I need to show anything other than to say I'm a citizen of this country and this is how I am? And that this Constitution applies to me? Do I need to say more?
This is now the argument you're taking to the
This is the argument for the appellate court. But let me read section 24 of the Constitution. It's been ignored for a long time. Section 24, the short title is Duty of Citizens. Now, it is strange that we do not actually understand that outside our fundamental rights, the Constitution creates duty for citizens. What does the Constitution expect me to do as a citizen of this? And that is part of the ground on which we took this case. And I'll read to you the duty of citizens. It shall be I lost him. But we'll come back. So the Constitution provides duty of citizens. So if you have a duty, what's the implication? What does it mean? If you have a duty of care in law, we know that you have a responsibility to care because it's an imposed duty. In this particular case, it is an imposed constitutional duty. What happens if the Constitution says you can be drafted to protect this country, and then the army requires soldiers and they come and say, like Innocent, you are qualified. What happened to me if I said I'm not doing it? I will have committed an offense. I will have been in breach of that constitutional provision that says I have a duty to do that. So if I have a duty as a citizen to protect the provisions of this constitution. And I go to court and I say, I am a citizen, I have this duty to protect this constitution. Not just that the constitution applies to me, but that the constitution provides a duty, that imposes a duty on me to act. And the court will still look at me and say, you don't have sufficient locus. Even when it is an imposed duty that I'm discharge that has been placed on me by the constitution. Because that was our argument for local standard. That outside the fact that we are NGOs, this law applies to us, this constitution applies to us, we also have a constitutional duty to act where the constitution is being abused. So I think it would be interesting that we just look at those provisions and then continue to agitate ourselves as to whether or not the requirement of local standard can be extended in the manner the court issued. Section 24 provides that it shall be the duty of every citizen, no exception, every citizen, to abide by this constitution, respect its ideals, its institutions, the national flag, the national anthem, the national pledge, and legitimate authority. Subsection B provides that help to enhance the power, good name of Nigeria, defend Nigeria and render such national service as may be required. See the interests of others and live in unity and harmony and in the spirit of common brotherhood. Make positive and useful contribution to the advancement and progress and well-being of communities where he resides. He could also render assistance to appropriate and lawful useful contribution to advancing progress, well-being, render assistance to appropriate lawful agencies in the maintenance of law and order. It's taking this matter to court, rendering such assistance. The National Assembly is falling and thinks it is the way to work, and I take it to court to say, oh, good, can you tell these people that's not the way to work? Am I rendering assistance to the National Assembly? That it is not acting constitutionally. I have a duty to make sure it acts constitutionally, and I go to court, and this is an imposed constitutional duty on me. Should anybody question why I have to do this when it is a duty?
No. Of course, that would go on the courts.
Yes. And there are so many problems with all the institutions, including all the citizens of this country, but we have to take steps to make sure we don't descend completely into chaos. And that is why NGOs exist in the first place. They are non-profit, and their basic object is their interest. So if you have a human rights NGO who makes sure that it assists to enhance the constitution and enhance the authorities of human rights in this country, finds that the fundamental rights of citizens or organizational citizens will be infringed by an act of the National Assembly, does it have a duty under the circumstance to challenge such attempts to breach a right of a citizen to fair hearing when it comes to the resolution of civil rights? Because the thing about the fundamental right provision, which we ignore a number of times, the right to fair hearing does not discharge you of any responsibility. It simply requires a process to holding somebody to responsible. So your right to bail, for example, as we keep having it, you're not helping the person. There's a presumption that he's innocent, and that is a constitutional presumption by this constitution. That even if you catch him in the act, you must presume him innocent. And there are so many reasons for that. They are excusable offenses. They are justifiable actions under the law. Now, if you do not hear from that person whether any of those, defenses avail him, you've already condemned him without hearing that. And the presumption exists to be able to do justice for all. That somebody comes to my house, I think an interesting provision would be section 92 of the Criminal Code, I'm not sure, that says nothing is an offense that is done pursuant to the protection of your life, the life of loved ones, or your property. Just somebody comes to my farm and I kill him. And then you simply look at the death of that person and do not look at my right to the protection of my life, the life of my family and my property, and you then pass judgment. Will that be fair? Even when I have a justifiable defense. If I'm not heard in an appropriate manner before an appropriate panel, how do we know that I may have that right to self-defense? And these are some of the issues we keep trying to hammer on fundamental rights. We're not saying do not hold associations accountable, but don't hold them accountable on your own prejudice. You can't be the accuser, the judge, and the executor at the same time. And that is what these provisions have placed on Cama. Company does not, the NGO has not made a return. We therefore can remove them and punish the executives. Will it be fairer if they have not made their return, take them to court, prove that they didn't make their return? If they have a defense for not making their return, which you may not know until you get to the arbiter, you're not treating them fairly. So take them to court. The court says, oh, you didn't make your defense, this is the punishment, and we punish. Well, that's all we're asking. We're just not saying the person who says you didn't make your return is the person who will try you and the person who will punish you. The Constitution says that is not fair. And we guarantee you who may be the victim of such judgment a right of a say, not a right to be freed. Just to say, we're not asking that NGOs will not make mistakes, no. But when mistakes are made, let them not tried by the person who determines that that thing is a mistake. But somebody who will look at what law that says that is not there and hear from both sides and then make that. I probably never beat my wife, even if she commits committable offenses. And there's a reason for why we want to have arbiters. I did some Sharia law, and I'm saying this so that you understand when I give the biblical example of David and the child that was supposed to be split into two. Solomon, sorry, that was supposed to be split into two. If that trial did not happen, in fact, for that very mundane thing Solomon did, he was said to be the wisest person. Just to hear the other party. Because the issue is cut the child into two. And the other woman said, no, give her the child. In that process, the child had been saved. Simply for hearing, but if we assume that the other woman will also, want a dead half of that child, and we cut the child into two and give her the dead child, will we have been doing justice to her? So the issue of fair hearing does not act an advantage to an accused person. It helps the system to be convinced that when we kill somebody, we have done everything we need to do to kill them and their bloods are not on our hands. That's the basis for fair hearing. What happens if after killing him, and that is when you do the trial and find out that we have mistakenly killed the person? Those are the basis for fair hearing. It's not to help an accused person, no. But if we presume him guilty, and that is in the mind of the judge, he has killed somebody, we caught him killing the person. and we take him to trial when he's doing that to save his child, or his wife, or his siblings, will he not have the right to do that? Like each and every one of us will have the right to do that. And I think that is the issue for the public hearing Prof was talking about. We need to discuss our laws from different perspectives. Different perspectives, because it may be good for this person, it may not necessarily be good for the other. Please. Okay. I'm done now. Let me take your question.
Yes. I don't know if mine is a question, or it's both a question and an observation at the same time. Because the issue you raised is nothing, the issue raised in this case is nothing new. If we have our minds back to the NBC, National Broadcasting Commission, there are two layers of judgment against them. The court before the motor show and at the court of appeal, where the court has said the NBC, the National Broadcasting Commission, cannot impose fines on stations when it is acting as the accuser, judge, and jury.
Absolutely, same similar circumstance.
And the object of the legislation is for you to make laws that are applicable.
Yes.
You can't make a law that will ultimately be overruled by the court, or nobody can implement. It's a waste of everybody's time, irrespective of the public area. I'm asking, is there no synergy within our legal and justice system where people can sit down and know that some of these laws can, will, or similar things have fallen flat on their face at the courts? Because these provisions here, they are very skilled. So if courts have repeatedly, let me say just the recent one, there have been previous decisions that have struck out provisions like this. Why are lawmakers still making this same laws? The Cama was enacted in the 1990s, has gone through so many transformations, and these things have been smuggled there the last time. Why are we still making such laws? People are still going.
The National Assembly makes budget for the judiciary. The executive arm of government releases funds to the National Assembly. So the person who plays the piper dictates the tune. So if the National Assembly wants to be favored by the executive, they will put in clauses that the executive wants. But who is threatened by what we do right now? The executive arm of government is the one that is worried by the activities of the NGOs. Odin Kalu has been up in arms. You think if there is a way they can shut him up, they won't do that? And that's why NGOs still exist, so that we can put the pressure. Individuals that do the things they do to help us all can be protected when we have a corporate organizing capabilities. Yes. All right. Yes. Yes.
What you are doing now, mostly is in platform that they are but two examples from the ground. Does it mean that when you move out to the side, you have to say that, or there are no end to this condition and what?
Now, it's, you know, I believe personally, and I'll say this because of the kind of question you asked, because I don't have any training or expertise in why people behave the way they do. But what I know is that humans will be humans. It's so bad that God loved the world, He sent His only begotten Son that we were all saved. And what we did was we hanged Him. we killed Jesus. Prophet Muhammad came, we fought Him. Those are God's people. So whether humans will stop, I don't think so. I mean, we had the 10 Commandments from the beginning. We are still incapable of living by 10 commandments. And we have created sections of the Constitution that are in the hundreds, outside other laws that were created when we couldn't keep just 10. Now, one example I give everybody in terms of why laws and their rules are important is I was driving 140 kilometers from Apanga to Abuja this morning. Now, I'm here. Say, I can swear to you one thing guaranteed, that there is a rule on the road that if I stick to my lane, I can move at that speed and I can get home safe. But if the other cars, as me, did not know where to drive, I probably wouldn't have gotten together. This is practical between us. We go to police now, not kill one another, because we have the perception that there is some kind of justice that does not require me to do self-help. And that sometimes self-help will get me into trouble. And we're all behaving. That is the importance of the law. That is the importance of the rule of law. So when we keep saying we don't do it, we make these laws for our own. They should be for our own good. Either you're on this side or on that side tomorrow. It is important. Laws are important. Good laws are very, very important. Institutions are very useful. Good institutions are very useful. What do bad institutions create? And I'll try and give you a political answer because you asked a political question. My father was kidnapped and killed the second time. If you ask me, how do you deal with kidnapping? Me personally, with the experience I've had, I think kidnapping is an economic problem. It's not a security problem. Because they asked me for money, they kidnapped for money. It wasn't intended to capture me or capture my territory. It's not a conflict based on any prejudice. It's a crime that was carried out for an economic reason. Fundamentally, every time you hear a demand for ransom, if somebody wants to make an economic impact on themselves. So instead of buying these guns, we can actually improve everybody's economy. That way, if they make money without having to go through the rigors of kidnapping people and the guilt they live with after that kidnapping, wouldn't that be a better option? Are we looking at it that way? Or we think we can just keep criminalizing them, make kidnapping the capital offense, and then the economic needs of these people that perpetrate this will still be there? With all the resources we have made in this country, where are we? In fact, I was listening to Sunusi. I shouldn't be saying this now. Government have removed all the benefit we get from government. Subsidy on fuel has gone. I bought diesel for 1,009 this morning. I earn much, much less than my cost of living is. And we're still taking loans. So if we get to the point that we no longer are eligible to loans, what will then be left for our government to take from us to satisfy its greed? Maybe our blood. They are taking the resources, it's not enough. They are taking the subsidies, it's not enough. They are taking loans, it's still not enough. If we get to that limit, what else will we have that our governments will want to take? I didn't say this at all. All right. Any other questions? I think we're behind time. Thank you very much. I'm sorry that I came late.
Thank you very much, sir. Please, another round of applause for him. Thank you. This has been a very insightful session. And I'm sure most of us who came into this room not fully understanding what this meeting was about are leaving with better understanding. And when I started earlier today, one thing I said that I think has also been a running theme in this conversation today was that this is not one person's problem. This is something that affects all of us. Just by the mere fact that we are Nigerians living in Nigeria, this is something that is affecting us in one way or the other. And that is why this case exists, and that's why cases like this exist. And that's the benefit of public interest litigation, or the interest of the public, being myself and you. So I know that we want to do interviews and we want to ask more questions. I'm sure there'll be time for that after this session, but we have to wrap up now because we're out of time. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for coming. By way of next steps, I think it's clear what we all need to do next. This isn't something that would stay in the four walls of this room. This is a conversation we should carry forward. This is a conversation we should bring out to the public because it's something that affects all of us. This is something that this is a message that we should try to echo in our own spaces, and that's why we're very particular about the media, because the media, serves as that bridge. And if this message and the outcomes of this conversation will reach the average man in his home, it is through you and through your platform that it will be driven. So we want to use this opportunity to generate public discourse on this issue and not make it something that's only restricted to people in the CSO space or in the legal space, but something that is of public discourse and should be talked about and should be talked about. So please, when we leave this room today, let us make a personal commitment to ensure that in our own way, based on our own understanding, we take this messaging, the outcomes of today forward. Advocacy is not only done in the courtrooms, it's also done in our own spaces and the platforms that we have. And so let's continue to use those platforms and leverage them to pass on important messages that we receive. So once again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for your time. If there are any interviews or anything that we want to do, let's try to get them done right now because it's time for lunch, so everybody can go and have lunch afterwards. Please, as you're leaving, make sure you have signed both forms and you collect a meal ticket before you go. So once again, thank you all so much for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.